The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window of Linda Martinez's cozy two-bedroom apartment in suburban Phoenix, casting golden streaks across the breakfast table where she sat with her coffee and phone. At 53, Linda had the kind of weathered beauty that spoke of decades spent caring for others, laugh lines earned from bedtime stories, worry lines from sleepless nights when her son Michael had fevers, and calloused hands from countless lunches packed with love. She scrolled through Michael's Instagram, her heart swelling with pride at photos of her 20-year-old son in his sharp business suits, standing confidently outside his marketing firm's downtown office. The captions were always professional, polished, so different from the boy, who used to run to her with scraped knees and broken toys. Linda's finger hovered over the screen. It had been 3 weeks since their last conversation, and the silence was eating at her. She'd raised Michael alone after his father left when he was 7, working double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college, his car, his dreams. Now that he was successful and independent, she felt more alone than ever. "Just a quick visit," she murmured to herself, grabbing her keys from the ceramic bowl Michael had made in third-grade art class. "I'll bring those cookies he loves." The drive to Michael's upscale neighborhood in Scottsdale took 30 minutes, but Linda had memorized every turn. The houses here were magnificent 2-story stucco homes with tile roofs and manicured lawns. That cost more to maintain than her monthly rent. Michael's house sat at the end of Saguaro Lane, a beautiful desert landscape framing its entrance. Linda parked behind his black BMW, her heart racing with anticipation. She'd surprised him like this before. Sometimes he seemed annoyed, but he always softened when he saw the homemade treats or heard her latest neighborhood gossip. Today felt different, though. Today, she needed to bridge whatever gap had formed. Between them, she rang the doorbell, clutching the container of chocolate chip cookies. Through the frosted glass, she could see Michael's silhouette approaching, his movements sharp and hurried. The door opened, and Linda's smile faltered. Michael stood there in a crisp white shirt and tie, his dark hair perfectly styled, but his expression was colder than she'd ever seen it. "Mom?" His voice was flat, professional. "What are you doing here?" "I brought cookies." Linda held up the container, her voice artificially bright. "Your favorites? I thought maybe we could have lunch, catch up. I know you're busy, but I have a conference call in 10 minutes. Michael's jaw tightened. "I told you I'd call you this weekend, but it's been 3 weeks, Michael. 3 weeks since we talked. I just wanted to see how you're doing. Make sure you're eating properly. You look thin." Michael's eyes flashed with irritation. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm 28 years old. I don't need you checking up on me." Linda felt her chest tighten. "I'm not checking up on you. I'm your mother. I worry about you. That's the problem." Michael's voice rose, and Linda noticed his neighbor's curtains twitching. "You worry too much. You hover. You show up here unannounced like I'm still 10 years old." "Michael, please, no, Mom, listen to me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "I need space. I need boundaries. I need you to stop treating me like a child." Linda's hands trembled as she held the cookie container. "I sacrificed everything for you. Everything. I worked myself to the bone so you could have opportunities, so you could become successful. And now you're telling me I don't have a place in your life? I'm grateful for everything you did, but that doesn't mean you get to control my life forever." The words hit Linda like a physical blow. "Control? Michael, I love you. I just want to be part of your life." Michael's expression softened for just a moment, but then hardened again. "Then respect my boundaries. Don't show up without calling. Don't assume I'm available whenever you feel lonely. I have my own life now." Linda stared at her son, this man she'd raised, who now stood before her like a stranger. "Don't show up without calling," she repeated slowly. "Yes, don't show up without calling." The finality in his voice shattered something inside her. Linda set the cookies on his doorstep and walked back to her car, her vision blurred with tears. She didn't look back as she drove away, but she could feel Michael watching from his window that night. Linda sat in her apartment, staring at the walls covered with photos of Michael through the years. First day of school, Little League games, high school graduation, college acceptance letter. Each image felt like a mockery now, a reminder of a relationship that had somehow become unwelcome. She picked up her phone, scrolling through real estate listings almost without thinking. Phoenix was expensive, but she had savings money she'd been setting aside for retirement, for emergencies, for the future she'd imagined spending with grandchildren she might never have. Her fingers stopped on a listing that made her heart skip. A house on Saguaro Lane, the same street. 3 houses down from Michael's. The price was steep, but not impossible. The photos showed a charming desert home with a perfect view of Michael's house from the front window. The listing had been active for weeks. Apparently, it needed work, which kept other buyers away. Linda stared at the screen, her mind racing. Don't show up without calling, she whispered to herself. Fine. I won't show up. I'll already be there. She clicked the realtor's phone number, her hands steady for the first time all day. Hello, this is Linda Martinez. I'd like to schedule a viewing for the house on Saguaro Lane. Tomorrow morning, if possible. As she hung up, Linda felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of control. Michael wanted boundaries. She'd give him boundaries, but she'd also give herself something she'd never had. The power to choose her own proximity to the person she loved most. The next morning, Linda stood in the driveway of 1247 Saguaro Lane, watching Michael load his briefcase into his BMW. He didn't notice her. Didn't see the woman who'd spent 28 years putting his needs first, now claiming her own space just 3 houses away. The realtor, an energetic woman named Sarah, appeared beside her. Mrs. Martinez, ready to see your potential new home? Linda smiled, her eyes never leaving Michael's retreating car. More ready than I've ever been. The house at 1247 Saguaro Lane was everything Linda needed and nothing she'd expected. Built in the 1980s, it had good bones but required significant updating, outdated fixtures, worn carpeting, and a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been touched since the Clinton administration. But it had something invaluable, a perfect view of Michael's house from the living room window. The previous owner was elderly, Sarah explained as they walked through the dusty rooms. Lived here for 30 years. Her family wants a quick sale, which is why the price is so competitive. Linda nodded, but she was calculating different numbers. After taxes and closing costs, buying this house would drain most of her savings. She'd need to pick up extra nursing shifts, maybe take on weekend work. But as she stood in the front bedroom, watching Michael's BMW pull into his driveway, she knew the sacrifice would be worth it. I'll take it, she said, surprising Sarah. With her decisiveness, full asking price, cash offer, Sarah's eyes widened. Mrs. Martinez, don't you want to think about it? Maybe have an inspection. I'm a nurse. I know how to spot problems and fix them. Linda's voice was steady, determined. I want to close as soon as possible. 3 weeks later, Linda stood in her new driveway, directing the moving truck with the confidence of a woman who'd made the best decision of her life. The November Phoenix sun was gentler than summer's brutal heat, and the desert air felt like freedom. She'd told no one about the move, not her sister Rosa, not her friends at the hospital, and certainly not Michael. Let him discover it on his own. Let him realize that his mother wasn't someone who disappeared quietly into the background. The moving crew worked efficiently, carrying her furniture and belongings into the house. Linda had purged ruthlessly before the move, keeping only what mattered. Photos of Michael, her grandmother's rocking chair, and the essentials for starting over. Ma'am, where do you want this? One of the movers held up a framed photo of Michael. In his college graduation gown, Linda beaming beside him in her best dress. Living room, Linda said. Right by the front window. As the afternoon wore on, Linda found herself stealing glances at Michael's house. His BMW wasn't in the driveway, probably still at work. She wondered what he'd think when he saw the moving truck. If he'd even noticed new neighbors moving in. Linda Martinez. She turned to find a woman in her 40s approaching from the house next to Michael's. Petite, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, she extended her hand with a warm smile. I'm Patricia Wells, Pat. I live right there. She pointed to the house between Linda's and Michael's. I saw the moving truck and wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. Linda shook her hand, surprised by the genuine warmth. Thank you, I'm Linda. Are you moving here alone? Pat asked, glancing at the truck. Yes, my son lives nearby, so I wanted to be closer to family. Pat's smile widened. How wonderful. There's nothing like having family close by. Which son? Linda felt her pulse quicken. Michael Martinez. He lives just down the street. Michael. Pat's face lit up with recognition. The handsome young man in the BMW. I've been wondering about him. Very quiet neighbor, keeps to himself. You must be so proud. He's always so well dressed, clearly successful. Very proud, Linda managed, though the words felt strange. When had she stopped feeling proud and started feeling desperate? Well, this is perfect timing, Pat continued. I was just about to start making dinner. Why don't you come over later? We can properly welcome you to the neighborhood. Linda was about to decline. She had unpacking to do, plans to make but something, and Pat's expression stopped her. It had been so long since anyone had invited her anywhere, offered her simple friendship without expectation. I'd like that, Linda said. Thank you. As Pat walked away, Linda noticed a BMW turning onto Saguaro Lane. Her heart jumped as she recognized Michael's car slowing down, his head turning toward the moving truck in front of 1247. She watched from behind the moving truck as Michael parked. In his driveway, his movements sharp and agitated. He climbed out of his car, staring at the activity at her house with obvious confusion. Linda could see him pull out his phone, probably calling the neighborhood association or trying to figure out who was moving in. The moving crew finished just as the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Linda tipped them generously and stood alone in her new driveway, keys in hand, looking at the house that now represented her rebellion and her hope. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Mom, are you okay? You didn't answer when I called this weekend." Linda stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could see his living room light on, could imagine him sitting in his expensive furniture, probably just now realizing he'd been worried about her. The irony wasn't lost on her. He'd pushed her away, then panicked when she actually gave him space. She typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy with some changes. I'll call you soon." She didn't mention that she was literally 3 houses away, that she could see his silhouette moving around his kitchen. Let him wonder. Let him realize that his mother had a life outside of waiting for his permission to exist in his world. Linda walked to her front door, inserted the key, and stepped into her new life. The house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She'd spent the last 3 weeks working with contractors, updating the electrical, installing new flooring, and painting every room in warm, welcoming colors. The living room was perfect. Her grandmother's rocking chair positioned by the window, where she could watch the street while working on her laptop or reading. The kitchen was small but functional, with a breakfast nook that got beautiful morning light. The master bedroom faced the backyard, giving her privacy, while the front bedroom she'd converted into a home office with a desk facing Michael's house. As she unpacked boxes, Linda felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Every item she placed, every decision she made was entirely her own. No one to consult, no one to please, no one to disappoint. Her phone rang, Pat inviting her over for dinner. "I made too much chicken enchilada casserole," Pat said, "and I'm dying to hear about your move. Fair warning, I'm terrible at minding my own business, but I make excellent margaritas." Linda laughed, the sound surprising her. "I'll be right over." Pat's house was warm and inviting, filled with the sense of good food and the sounds of life. She had a husband, Tom, who worked as a high school principal, and 2 teenage daughters, who were polite but more interested in their phones than their mother's new neighbor. "So, Linda," Pat said as they sat on her back patio with drinks, "tell me about this move. It must be exciting, starting fresh in a new place." Linda sipped her margarita, feeling the tequila loosened her tongue. "It's been a long time coming. I needed a change, and your son will love having you so close. Does he know you're here?" Linda felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Not yet. I wanted to get settled first." Pat's expression grew curious, but not judgmental. Sometimes the best surprises are the ones we keep to ourselves for a while. They talked for hours about Pat's work as a graphic designer, Tom's challenges with teenage students, the neighborhood dynamics, and the small dramas that made suburban life interesting. Linda found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, laughing at Pat's stories and sharing her own experiences from the hospital. "You know," Pat said as the evening wound down, "I've been watching Michael for 2 years, and I've never seen him with visitors. No girlfriend, no family, no friends. Just work and home, work and home. Seems like a lonely way to live." Linda's chest tightened. He's focused on his career. Maybe, or maybe he's just forgotten how to let people in. Pat's eyes were kind, but knowing sometimes the people we love most are the hardest to reach. As Linda walked back to her house, she could see Michael's bedroom light still on. She wondered if he was working late, if he was thinking about her unanswered calls, if he felt the same hollow loneliness she'd been carrying for months. She stood in her new living room, looking out at his house, and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't about revenge or control. This was about proximity to love, even when that love felt impossible to reach. Tomorrow, she would continue unpacking. Tomorrow, she would figure out how to live 3 houses away from her son without going crazy. But tonight, she would sleep in her own house on her own terms, with her own keys in her own pocket. For the first time in 28 years, Linda Martinez was exactly where she wanted to be. Linda had been living at 1247 Saguaro Lane for 2 weeks when Michael finally noticed she was in her front yard planting desert marigolds along the walkway. When she heard the screech of brakes and saw his BMW sitting in the middle of the street, through her peripheral vision, she watched Michael get out of his car, leaving the driver's door open as he stared at her with undisguised shock. He wore his usual work uniform, pressed shirt, tie, briefcase in hand, but his perfect composure had cracked. "Mom," his voice carried across the 3 houses between them. "Mom, what the hell?" Linda continued planting, her movements deliberate and calm. She'd been preparing for this moment, rehearsing her responses, but her heart still hammered against her ribs. "Language, Michael," she called back without looking up. "Mrs. Henderson from your corner house is probably listening." Michael strode across the street, his dress shoes clicking against the asphalt. "What are you doing here? Whose house is this?" Linda sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her gardening gloves. "It's my house. I bought it 3 weeks ago." "Your house?" Michael's voice cracked. "You bought a house?" "Here, on my street. Saguaro Lane isn't your street, sweetheart. It's a public road in Scottsdale, Arizona." Linda's voice was steady, almost pleasant. "And yes, I bought this house. Closed escrow last Friday." Michael ran his hands through his hair, messing up his perfectly styled appearance. "This is insane. You can't just buy a house on my street because I asked for boundaries." "I'm not showing up without calling," Linda said, standing and dusting off her jeans. "I'm already here. That's not what I meant, and you know it." Linda finally looked directly at her son, taking in his flushed face and agitated movements. "What exactly did you mean, Michael? Because I've been trying to figure that out for weeks." Michael looked around, noticing neighbors starting to emerge from their houses. Pat appeared on her front step, pretending to water plants while obviously listening. An elderly man from 2 houses down walked his dog slower than usual, his attention fixed on the family drama unfolding. "Can we please discuss this inside?" Michael's voice was tighter, more controlled. "Your house or mine?" Linda asked sweetly. Michael's jaw twitched. "Yours? Obviously yours." Linda led him up the walkway she'd just been beautifying. Past the front door she'd painted a cheerful yellow, into the living room she'd arranged with meticulous care. She watched Michael's eyes take in the familiar furniture arranged in an unfamiliar space, the photos of him prominently displayed, the rocking chair positioned perfectly to see his house. "Jesus, Mom?" Michael sank onto her couch, his briefcase forgotten on the floor. "You can see right into my living room from here." The view was a selling point, Linda said, settling into her grandmother's rocking chair. "Would you like some coffee? I made cookies yesterday." "I don't want coffee. I want to understand why my mother has lost her mind." Linda's pleasant expression faltered for just a moment. "I haven't lost my mind, Michael. I've found my backbone by stalking me, by moving 3 houses away so you can watch my every move. I'm not stalking you. I'm living my life in the house I bought with my money." Linda's voice gained strength. "You told me not to show up without calling. You told me you needed space. I respected that. I haven't called you once since I moved in, but you're here. You're right here, watching me. I'm existing in my own space. There's a difference." Michael stood up, pacing to the window that faced his house. "This is manipulation. This is emotional blackmail." "Is it?" Linda rocked gently in her chair. "Or is it a mother refusing to disappear just because her son decided she's inconvenient?" The words hung in the air between them. Michael's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, Linda saw the little boy who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. "I never said you were inconvenient," he said quietly. "Then what did you say, Michael?" "Because I've been replaying our conversation for weeks, trying to understand where I went wrong." Michael turned from the window, his expression conflicted. "You didn't go wrong, you gave up everything for me. Your whole life revolved around me. And now that I'm grown up, you don't know how to be anything else." Linda felt the truth of his words like a slap. "So buying this house proves your point, doesn't it? You moved here because you can't let go. You can't accept that I'm an adult with my own life." "I moved here because I got tired of waiting for permission to exist in your world." Linda's voice was stronger now, more certain. "I spent 28 years being your mother first and Linda second. I worked nights so I could be at your school plays. I skipped dates so I could help with your homework. I put off my own dreams, my own life, my own happiness because you came first. Always." Michael's expression softened. "I never asked you to do that. You were a child. Children shouldn't have to ask their parents to sacrifice. But you're not a child anymore, and I'm not just your mother anymore. I'm a 53-year-old woman who deserves to make her own choices about where to live and how to spend her money. But why here? Why this house?" Linda was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the gentle creaking of her rocking chair. "Because I love you, Michael. Because even when you push me away, even when you make me feel like I'm too much, I still love you. And this house means I can love you from a distance. I can see that you're safe and healthy and successful without bothering you. I can exist in your vicinity without requiring your attention." Michael sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. "This is so messed up. Maybe, but it's my choice to make." They sat in silence for several minutes. Through the window, Linda could see Pat, obviously trying to look busy in her front yard while keeping an eye on Michael's abandoned BMW still sitting in the middle of the street. "I should move your car," Michael finally said. The neighbors are staring, let them stare. Small towns thrive on gossip. Michael managed a weak smile. Scottsdale isn't exactly a small town. Every neighborhood is a small town if you pay attention. Michael moved his car, then returned to Linda's living room. This time, he accepted her offer of coffee and sat at her kitchen table like a guest instead of pacing like a caged animal. Pat, from next door, stopped by yesterday, Linda said, pouring coffee into mugs. She's been watching you for 2 years, wondering why you never have visitors. Michael winced. I have visitors. When I've been here 2 weeks, and the only people I've seen at your house are delivery drivers and the lawn service. I have coworkers. I go out, but no one comes to your house. No friends, no girlfriend, no family. Linda sat across from him, cradling her mug. Pat thinks you're lonely. Pat doesn't know me, neither do I, apparently. Linda's voice was gentle, but pointed. When did you become so isolated, Michael? When did you decide that needing people was weakness? Michael stared into his coffee. I'm not isolated. I'm independent. There's a difference between independence and isolation, is there? Because it feels like everyone who gets close wants something from me. Coworkers want favors. Dates want commitment. Friends want money or connections. He looked up at her. You want access? Linda felt her heart break a little. I want relationship, Michael. I want to know how you're doing, what you're thinking about, what makes you happy. I want to share meals and stories and the ordinary moments that make life rich. That's not access, that's love. But your love feels like pressure, like obligation, like I owe you something because of everything you sacrificed. Do you think I sacrificed for you so you'd owe me? Michael was quiet for a long time. I don't know. Maybe it's hard to separate love from debt when someone gives up everything for you. Linda reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. I didn't give up everything, Michael. I gave up some things to gain others. I gave up dating to gain bedtime stories. I gave up travel to gain your soccer games. I gave up a social life to gain the privilege of raising an incredible human being, but now I'm raised and you're alone. I'm alone because I never learned how to be anything besides your mother. That's not your fault, that's mine. But buying this house, that's me learning. That's me figuring out how to love you without losing myself. Michael squeezed her hand by moving 3 houses away. By creating a life that includes you without revolving around you. Linda smiled. I have a job I love, a house I chose, a neighbor who makes excellent margaritas. I have a life, Michael, and part of that life is loving you from whatever distance keeps us both healthy. They talked until the sun set, sharing truths they'd both been avoiding. Michael admitted to his loneliness, his fear of disappointing people, his habit of pushing away anyone who got too close. Linda admitted to her codependency, her identity crisis, her desperate need to feel needed. As Michael prepared to leave, he paused at her front door. This is still crazy, you know, living 3 houses away. Maybe, but it's my kind of crazy. Michael smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in months. I love you, Mom, even when you're completely insane. I love you too, sweetheart. Even when you're scared of that love. As she watched him walk to his house, Linda felt something shift between them. Not resolution that would take time, but recognition. They were both learning how to love each other as adults, how to maintain connection without sacrificing autonomy. It was a start. 3 months after, Michael discovered his mother living 3 houses away. The morning routine had become oddly comfortable. Linda would sit in her kitchen with coffee and watch him load his BMW, occasionally waving if he looked her way. He'd started waving back, sometimes even calling out good morning. Mom, across the distance between their driveways, the neighborhood, had adapted to their unusual arrangement with the gossipy enthusiasm Pat had predicted. Mrs. Henderson, the 70-year-old busybody from the corner house, had appointed herself the unofficial mediator of their relationship, offering unsolicited advice to both parties during chance encounters at the mailbox. Your mother has lovely flower beds, she'd told Michael one evening. Shows real commitment to the neighborhood. Your son works too much, she'd informed Linda the next day. Never see him outside except rushing to that fancy car. Linda had settled into a rhythm she'd never experienced before independence. With proximity, she'd picked up extra shifts at Phoenix General Hospital where her colleagues were fascinated by her unconventional approach to empty nest syndrome. Her supervisor, Dr. Reeves, had dubbed her the most interesting empty nester in Arizona. Most parents move to Florida or buy a condo, Dr. Reeves had said during a break. You moved closer to your kid. Either you're a genius or you're completely nuts, probably both, Linda had replied, and she'd meant it. The breakthrough came on. A Tuesday evening in February, Linda was in her front yard, adjusting the irrigation system she'd installed for her expanding garden, when she heard a car door slam with unusual force. She looked up to see Michael standing beside his BMW, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, his tie loose, his hair messed up. He stood there for a moment, staring at his house like he'd forgotten how to enter it. Then, surprisingly, he turned and walked toward Linda's house. "Bad day?" Linda asked, not looking up from the irrigation timer. "The worst." Michael's voice was tight with frustration. Would it be okay if I came inside for a minute?" Linda's heart leaped, but she kept her voice casual. "Of course. I made chicken and rice if you're hungry." Michael followed her inside, sinking onto her couch with a heavy sigh. Linda disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a plate of food and a glass of water. She didn't ask questions, didn't push for explanations. Just let him eat while she sat in her rocking chair working on a crossword puzzle. "I got fired today," Michael finally said. Linda's pen stopped moving. "What happened?" "Budget cuts. They eliminated my entire department." Michael set down his fork, his appetite apparently gone. 5 years with the company. Glowing performance reviews, none of it mattered. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, that's devastating. The worst part is how they did it. Called me into the conference room at 4 p.m., had security escort me out with a box of my stuff, like I was a criminal instead of someone who'd worked 60-hour weeks for them." Linda wanted to comfort him, to offer solutions, to fix it like she'd fixed his problems when he was younger. Instead, she asked, "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea. I've been so focused on work that I don't have anything else. No hobbies, no friends, no backup plan." Michael looked around her living room, his eyes landing on the photo of his college graduation. "I don't even know who I am without that job." "You're Michael Martinez," Linda said simply. "You're brilliant and hardworking and kind. You're the person who taught himself to code in high school and built a computer from scratch. You're the man who stops to help elderly neighbors with their groceries. You're my son, and you're more than any job title." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so scared of failing that I forgot how to try." "What do you mean?" "I took that job because it was safe. Good salary, clear expectations, minimal risk. But I've been miserable for 2 years. I've been thinking about starting my own consulting firm, but that felt too risky, too uncertain." Linda set down her crossword. "And now? Now I have severance pay, unemployment benefits, and nothing to lose." Michael managed a weak smile. "Maybe getting fired is the push I needed." "Maybe it is." They talked until midnight, with Michael sharing dreams he'd buried under corporate obligations and Linda offering perspective without advice. She'd learned over the past 3 months that her son needed space to process more than he needed solutions. "I'm going to stay home tomorrow," Michael said as he prepared to leave. "Figure out my next steps. It'll be weird not having anywhere to go." "You could help me with my vegetable garden," Linda offered. "I'm putting in raised beds this weekend." Michael paused at her door. "Really? If you want to? No pressure." The next morning, Linda woke to the sound of someone working in her backyard. She looked out her bedroom window to see Michael already dressed in old clothes, measuring the space she'd designated for her garden. "You're up early for an unemployed person," she called through the window. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well be productive." They spent the day building raised beds, mixing soil, and planning the layout for vegetables. Michael's corporate intensity redirected into precise measurements and perfect corners. But Linda could see him relaxing as the physical work cleared his mind. "I forgot how much I like working with my hands," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Everything in my job was digital, abstract. This is real. Your grandfather was like that. He could fix anything, build anything. You have his hands." Michael looked at his dirt-stained palms. "I barely remember him. He would have been proud of you. The job, the house, the success, but also this. The willingness to start over when something isn't working." Pat appeared at the fence separating their yards, carrying a pitcher of lemonade and wearing a knowing smile. "Looks like you two are making progress." "Linda's teaching me about gardening," Michael said, accepting a glass gratefully. "I'm learning about starting over," Linda corrected. "Michael's teaching me about that." Over the following weeks, Michael's unemployment became an opportunity for both of them to rebuild their relationship. He'd come over in the mornings to work in the garden, stay for lunch. Sometimes spend the afternoon researching his business plan at Linda's kitchen table. "It's easier to focus here," he explained. "My house feels like a museum. Everything's perfect and nothing's lived in. You could change that." "I'm thinking about it. Maybe get some plants. Definitely getting rid of that white leather couch. It's like sitting on a glacier." Linda laughed. "I always wondered how you could relax on that thing." "I couldn't. That was kind of the point." Their conversations became deeper, more honest. Michael talked about his fears of commitment, his struggle with perfectionism, his realization that he'd built a life that looked successful from the outside but felt empty from within. Linda shared her own discoveries about identity, independence, and the difference between loving someone and needing them. "I think I understand now why you moved here," Michael said one evening as they sat on Linda's back patio. "It wasn't about controlling me or invading my space. It was about refusing to disappear." "Exactly. I was tired of making myself smaller. To make you more comfortable, and I was tired of feeling guilty for growing up." They sat in comfortable silence watching the sunset paint the desert sky in brilliant colors. Linda's phone buzzed with a text from Pat. "You two figured it out yet? Or do I need to keep making excuses to water my plants?" Linda showed Michael the message, and they both laughed. "She's been watching us work through this whole thing," Michael said. "She told me that good neighbors are like good therapists. They listen without judgment and know when to offer snacks. She's not wrong." 6 weeks after getting fired, Michael signed his first client for his new consulting firm. The contract was small but significant, a local startup that needed help with their marketing strategy. "I'm terrified," he admitted to Linda as they celebrated with takeout Chinese food in her living room. "Good. Terror means you care. What if I fail? Then you'll learn something and try again. That's what people do." Michael looked around Linda's living room, taking in the photos and furniture and evidence of a life well lived. "You know what's funny? I spent so much energy trying to keep you at a distance, but having you close, really close, has made me feel less suffocated, not more. Because proximity isn't the same as intrusion," Linda said. "I can be here for you without being in your way, and I can love you without feeling guilty about having my own life." Linda smiled. "Look at us, figuring out how to be adults together." 3 months later, Michael's consulting firm had grown to 3 employees, and he'd started dating Sarah, a teacher he'd met at a neighborhood barbecue Pat had organized. Linda had watched from her kitchen window as Michael introduced Sarah to his friends the first time she'd seen him bring anyone to his house. "She's lovely," Linda told Pat during one of their evening walks around the neighborhood. "Patient with his awkwardness, laughs at his terrible jokes. She's good for him, and you're okay with sharing him?" Linda considered the question seriously. "I'm okay with him being happy. That's all I ever really wanted." The transformation in Michael was remarkable. His house, once a sterile showplace, now had plants on the windowsills and books scattered on tables. He'd replaced the white leather couch with a comfortable sectional where he and Sarah could actually relax. He'd started cooking, hosting small dinner parties, building the kind of life that included other people. "I never realized how lonely I was," he told Linda one evening as they worked together in her garden, now flourishing with tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. "I thought independence meant not needing anyone." "I made the same mistake in reverse," Linda said, deadheading flowers. "I thought love meant being needed all the time." We're both learning. Linda's own life had expanded in ways she hadn't expected. Dr. Reeves had offered her a promotion to charge nurse, recognizing her leadership skills and experience. She'd joined a book club, started taking photography classes, and discovered a passion for landscape design that began with her own yard and expanded to helping neighbors with their gardens. "You've become the neighborhood plant guru," Pat teased. Mrs. Henderson asked me if Linda would look at her roses. "Mrs. Henderson has been gardening for 40 years. What could I possibly teach her? Maybe it's not about what you know. Maybe it's about how you listen." The insight hit Linda with unexpected force. She'd spent so much of her life trying to solve problems, to fix things, to provide answers, but her relationship with Michael had improved not because she'd given him solutions, but because she'd finally learned to give him space, physical space, emotional space. Space to be imperfect and uncertain and human. The 1-year anniversary of Linda's move to Saguaro Lane arrived on a perfect Arizona morning in November. She was in her front yard, planting bulbs for spring flowers, when Michael appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee and a small wrapped package. "Happy house anniversary," he said, settling onto the grass beside her. "You remembered." Linda accepted the coffee gratefully. "I remembered the exact date because it was the day I realized my mother was braver than I ever gave her credit for." Linda unwrapped the package to find a small ceramic tile with 1247 painted in cheerful yellow numbers, a house number sign that matched her front door. "I made it in Sarah's art class," Michael said, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's not perfect, but it's beautiful." Linda held the tile up to catch the morning light. "Absolutely perfect. I've been thinking about that day you moved in, how angry I was, how scared. I thought you were trying to control my life, but you were actually trying to save your own." Linda planted another bulb, her hands steady in the familiar soil. "We were both trying to figure out how to love each other without losing ourselves in the process. Have we figured it out?" Linda looked across the street at Michael's house where Sarah's car sat in the driveway and curtains moved in the morning breeze. She looked at her own house with its cheerful yellow door and thriving garden and evidence of a life chosen rather than simply endured. "We're figuring it out," she said. "Every day." Michael helped her finish planting the bulbs. There. Conversation easy and comfortable, punctuated by comfortable silences. When they were done, Linda made breakfast while Michael called Sarah to invite her over. 3 plates, Linda said, setting the table in her sunny kitchen. "Actually, 4. I invited Pat too. She said she's been dying to hear about your photography class." Linda smiled, looking at her kitchen table set for 4 people, at the life she'd built that included her son without revolving around him. At the relationships she'd cultivated that were based on choice rather than obligation. A year ago, she'd been Linda the mother, defined entirely by her relationship to Michael. Today, she was Linda, the nurse, the neighbor, the friend. The woman who'd bought a house 3 doors down from her son, not to control his life, but to claim her own. "You know what the best part is?" she asked Michael, as they waited for their guests to arrive. "What's that?" "I don't need to be in your life anymore. I get to be in your life, and that makes all the difference." Michael hugged her, and Linda felt the complete absence of desperation in the embrace. No clinging, no fear, no unspoken demands for more than what was freely given. Just love, simple and clean and sustainable, through her kitchen window. Linda could see Pat walking across the yard with a plate of her famous cookies, and Sarah's car pulling into Michael's driveway. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Reeves about a new project at the hospital, and she had plans to meet her book club later that evening to discuss their latest selection. Linda Martinez had moved 3 houses away from her son to prove a point about boundaries and love. Instead, she'd discovered something far more valuable herself. And in finding herself, she'd found a way to love Michael that enriched both their lives, instead of constraining them. It had taken 53 years and one impossibly bold real estate decision. But Linda had finally learned the difference between being needed and being wanted, between proximity and intrusion, between loving someone and losing yourself in that love. As Pat knocked on the door and Sarah walked across the street with a bunch of flowers from her own garden, Linda realized that her gamble had paid off in ways she'd never imagined. She'd set out to stay close to her son, and instead, she'd learned how to build a life worth staying close to. The house at 1247 Saguaro Lane had become more than Linda's rebellion or her refuge. It had become home, not just a place where she lived, but a foundation for the life she'd chosen to build. 3 houses away from the son she loved and exactly where she belonged.